Tiffany Bluhm visits us today from Washington State, where she lives with her husband and 2 boys. Tiffany is a speaker, writer, and co-host of the podcast Why Though? Her books, She Dreams and Never Alone, have reached thousands of women, bringing encouragement and truth. She enjoys speaking to women, and her work has been featured on outlets such as Today Parents, YouVersion Bible app, the Hallmark Channel, ScaryMommy.com, and Thrive Global. Tiffany is navigating the choppy waters just like you, and she is hungry to spend herself on a life that's more exciting than boxed wine and grocery store sushi. She Conference welcomes Tiffany Bluhm.
And the good news is, Scripture gives us ample weaponry, encouragement to know that it's all true. I often have to remind my kids, this isn't fantasy, although it sounds like it. The gospel, the Old Testament, the New Testament, this isn't the fantasies you're going to watch on TV. This is all true. And once we can get on board with that, and not just this, mental furniture that doesn't move and just sits in the recesses of our mind, but once we can participate with understanding who he is and count on that encouragement and lean on it when we fall, everything changes. Don't you agree? I want to read to you from Isaiah 43 here in a minute, but I want to set it up a little bit. In Isaiah 43 in the Old Testament, the Israelites, the chosen people of God in the Old Testament, in the New Testament is all of us, but in the Old Testament, they had escaped from Egypt. Moses, who we're going to talk about in just a hot minute, was their leader. But they found themselves, because they hadn't learned their lesson, and this goodness leaks, right? This understanding that God is faithful, under pressure, it leaks. It did for them, it does for us. And they were enslaved once again, this time in Babylon. Let me read you the encouragement here in Isaiah 43, 1 through 7. This is Isaiah's good word of encouragement. It's God's precious promise to his people in a time of affliction when they were under duress and they didn't know what was going to happen. They were convinced destruction was on its way. Have you ever had those nights when you're like, I don't know how I'm going to live through this. I don't know how we're going to see the light of day again. And then if you're anything like me, if you're into the Enneagram, I'm a 3. I like to accomplish things, move on, learn a new lesson. I think we sometimes struggle to hold both good and heavy moments in the same hand. Something new, we're in a new season, and then we're still tender. We still have pressure points that we may take to the grave. Until we see Jesus face to face, we still might be tender in places we don't want to be. But may it build in us compassion. Let me read to you, Isaiah 43. But now, thus says the Lord, he who created you, O Jacob, he who formed you, O Israel. When Jacob wrestled with God, he got a new name, and it was Israel. That's why it says that twice. Fear not, for I have redeemed you. Notice the past tense there. They're currently in affliction. That's not a present tense verb, is it? It's a past tense. He's reminding them of all he's done. Let us be reminded of God's track record in our lives when we're up to something new and we feel like we're going to drown. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. Referring to the Red Sea. And through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. Through the Jordan. When you walk through fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. I give Egypt as your ransom, Cush and Seba in exchange for you, because you are precious in my eyes and honored, and I love you. I give men in return for you, people in exchange for your life. Fear not, for I am with you. Let me pause on that. As we stand in the shadow of Christmas, what did the angel say to Mary? What was the first thing he said? Fear not. Fear not usually comes before some really good news. I will bring your offspring from the east, and from the west I will gather you. Because remember, they'd been scattered. They'd been enslaved once again and then scattered all over Babylon. I will say to the north, give up, and to the south, do not withhold. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the end of the earth. Everyone who was called by my name, whom I created for my glory, not our glory, not our self-interest, his glory, whom I formed and made. Now, I don't know about you, but that's a good word. After Prince Charming called it quits, you could find me curled up in the fetal position, quoting the Psalms over and over again. The psalmist knew my number, and I sure had the receipts in those days. The days when you feel like you can't move on, when nobody gets it. I think another thing that really blows in the faith community is that if you don't get over it in a certain amount of time, in a prescribed amount of time that other people feel is acceptable, then we get labeled the girl who can't get over it, right? Because we want you to get it together because God is able. There's no doubt that God is able. There's also no doubt that our pain is heavy. You don't just throw that off easily, do you? That can take some time. But our aversion to pain, we are so repelled by pain in ourselves, which is why we stuff it down deep, and in others, which is why we push them away. And the sweet Lord will not do that because he knows as warriors, we need his presence. So how do we valiantly take these scriptures, swallow them whole, and believe them and carry on? First, we understand that a warrior knows her value. Now, most of us have seasons where we feel fully engaged, where we feel like we are killing it, slaying it at whatever we slay. It could be meal planning. It could be our job. It could be relationships are going really well. It could be anything. You fill in the blank. You know when you feel like you're doing well. You know when you feel like everything's looking up and it's a sunny day. You know, when we were in there, I was thinking about this. They played the song Happy by Pharrell Williams. When I'm happy, You know that one, right? You just like my hip shaking, I know. It's okay. I'll dance for you. I hate that song with every fiber of my being. I want it to die 1,000 deaths. Oh my gosh. I'm like, where's the sound system and give me a hammer? Let me tell you why. I had a hellacious pregnancy, and I had hyperemesis gravidarum, and it was, for those of you who don't know, I would just like to say Kate Middleton had it, so if a princess had it, I'm happy to have a sickness that demands I throw up over 17 times a day, trying to build a baby. I was like, I don't know if this is worth it. I don't know, man. My sanity is gone. Anyway, there's those moments when you feel like you've got it. And then there's those moments when you want to take a hammer to Pharrell Williams' song because you're just like, I can't, and it reminds you, right? In the good times when we feel like we're killing it, and in the bad, neither determine our value. Neither of those. When you feel like everything's going great, that does not determine your value. When everything's an absolute crapshoot, that does not determine your value either. Now, here's another thing. Sometimes we wonder if our value is in jeopardy when we aren't what people want us to be anymore, when we do not fit the paradigm that they have set out for us. Maybe we've pursued growth in a way that they haven't, and they don't want to be around it anymore because it's reminding them of what they don't have and what they haven't worked through. So who we are now, although we're working internally, externally, we're not accepted anymore. That can threaten our value as well, our understanding of our value. And lastly, there could be certain seasons when your creativity, when your capabilities, when your gifts have been reduced to nothing at the hands of somebody else. When you have felt worthless, inadequate in their presence. Could be abuse in any form, emotional, spiritual, relational, on the job. Whatever it was, you're left feeling worthless. You're left feeling tender in ways you never felt insecure about before. And here's the thing, in all those situations and times and seasons, our insecurities threaten our sense of identity. Do you hear that? Our insecurities, they threaten our sense of identity, who God made us to be. Even worse, our insecurities threaten our understanding of our own abilities and gifts. Our own abilities, we start to question. Insecurities are powerful, aren't they? Laura was so transparent of her struggles, of where she really found life hard. And I was like, girl, you telling the truth right now. We would never admit to shutting our kid's finger in the door and then telling 400 women about it. Until we were really clear that nobody would be triggered by that, right? Like, it was beautiful. I'm like, man, tell it like it is, girl. Those insecurities bleed into every area of our life. And they really, really blur our vision. In the Old Testament, in Numbers 13, when the people of God wanted to claim what they knew God had given him, Moses, the emancipator of the Old Testament, he led over 1 million people out of captivity from Egypt. He sent out 12 spies to the promised land. The promised land that God had said from the beginning, I have a place for you, a land flowing with milk and honey. Which I am so for that. Milk and honey, that's like the basis of a good cappuccino, right? Like, so yummy. And off those spies go. 12 spies come back. They'd surveyed the land. Joshua and Caleb, 2 spies, Joshua speaks up and he says, it's beautiful. It's everything God said it would be. It's everything we've been waiting for. And Caleb backs him up. Such a good wingman. Says, yes, it's all true. It's waiting for us to be, we just got to take it. We just got to take it. We got to stand up and believe that God's going to be with us, and we got to get after it. But the other 10, they came back saying, it is overrun with giants. We could never take it. Their past insecurities and failures were projected on their future conquests. Everything that had been before, they relied on to understand how future operations would play out. And we do the same. We look at our past failures and mistakes, and that's how we build our future. That's how we walk our path. And Joshua and Caleb pleaded with Moses, believe us. It is ripe. It is ripe for us to take. God has got this for us. But they didn't do it. And because they didn't take it, they would wander for another countless amount of years. A whole generation would die before they would see that promised land. Now, if you fast forward, knowing that Moses anticipated defeat, those spies anticipated failure, even though God had beautiful plans for them, we see much later in Joshua 2, where Joshua is now in charge. And Joshua sends out not 12 spies, 2, because 2 only brought good news the last time, so we thought 2's good. Let's do that. So he sends out 2 spies, and they come back, and they said this. They spied the land just as they had done before, but this time, they reported back that they could take it. So what changed? What changes when we let our past failures and mistakes play a heavy hand in how we deal life right now? Versus going in a new direction, knowing that God is faithful and that the old is past but the new is coming, and walking out in glory, in victory instead of defeat? After betrayal, after our husband left us, after we got released from that job, after everything turned into an enormous dumpster fire, how do we walk in victory? We don't anticipate defeat. We anticipate the presence of God. We go forward anticipating that he's going to be with us every step of the way. We must be able to separate those mistakes from our internal and external self. taking them out, looking them out, examining them from every angle, setting them down. You are not the sum of your failures. You are not the sum of your mistakes. You may hear that, and as Laura said, abstractly understand that, but that may not be your lived experience. The way you pursue friendship, the lies you believe about your relationships or your marriage or your children, that grief plays out in every area. And it is limiting us from walking into the vision God has for us. It's robbing us blind, and we are living beneath our privilege. Did you hear me? Did you hear that? So many of us live beneath our privilege. And I know that you represent your whole tribe. I love this tagline for this, the She Tribe, #SheTribe19. You represent so many beautiful people in your world. And when when change for the positive happens in you, it doesn't just stay with you, does it? Everyone wins. I cannot help but believe, as I've been praying for you, anticipating our time together, that you are a force for good on the earth. You are a force for greatness. I know you need to hear this right now. You're doing better than you think you are. You're doing better than you think you are. Sometimes we just feel like an utter failure. Like, yeah, this is who I am. This is never going to change, right? I'm always just going to be a mess up. And that's not the truth. That's not who you are. That's not what the King speaks over you. You are a woman of mercy and grace and power and vision and courage. Understand with that, if that's your true identity, more often than not, our deepest wounds surround our greatest gifts. Our greatest gifts. Therapist Ken Page says it this way: when we understand our lives through the lens of our gifts, it's as if we step out from behind the tapestry and really see it for the first time. All of a sudden, things make sense. We see the real picture, the moving human story of what matters most to us. We begin to understand that our biggest mistakes, our most self-sabotaging behaviors were simply convulsive, unskilled attempts to express the deepest parts of ourselves. May we discover our gifts. Why? Because the King gave them to you in the first place. It was his idea. And to let those sit on the shelf while insecurities call the shots, that's not the life you were promised. Secondly, a warrior knows what's at stake. A warrior knows what will happen if she doesn't step up. A warrior knows what will happen if she does. A warrior knows what she'll gain, and she knows what she can lose. And the only way to make it through is to trust the one who called her a warrior in the first place. We can do that. We can trust our God who is for us the way he was for Abraham, the way he was for Isaac, and the way he was for Jacob. He's here for us too. One of my favorite authors, Brennan Manning, said it this way: the way of trust is a movement into obscurity, into the undefined, into ambiguity, not into some predetermined, clearly delineated plan for the future. The next step discloses itself only out of a discernment of God, acting in the desert of the present moment. The reality of naked trust is the life of the pilgrim who leaves what is nailed down, obvious and secure, and walks into the unknown without any rational explanation to justify the decision or guarantee the future. Why? Because God has signaled the movement and offered it his presence and his promise. The life we were destined to live is on the other side of trust. It's through trust. We cannot make it. We will not arrive at heaven's gates without trusting the King with every part of us. So many of us would say we don't struggle with idolatry until it talks about security. And they're like, oh, security. Whether it's knowing you got a place to live, knowing you got cash in the bank, knowing your kids are going to be okay, your man's going to be okay, your people are going to be okay, job security. We all have our grimy hands held so tightly, control on security because we crave it. Because we all crave Eden. We all crave what it was supposed to be. Safe, secure, overcome with love and peace. And what we lost, we want again. And the only way we have that is through trusting the King. And you will find, I'll tell you right now, he is so trustworthy. Because our relief does not come when our problems cease. It comes when we trust the Lord. When we trust him with every fiber of our being. Psalm 62, 5-7 says, for God alone, O my soul, wait in silence, for my hope is from him. He only is my rock and my salvation, my fortress, I shall not be shaken. O God, rest my salvation and my glory, my mighty rock, my refuge is God. The psalmist wrote those words when he feared for his safety, when security was under threat, when he wasn't sure what was going to happen. And again, why must we talk about security? Why must we address our insecurities and our hunger for control? Because when a warrior knows what's at stake, she knows that may be the first thing to go, but that God is still faithful. We can trust him. We're not trusting in our ability for things to work out right. Sometimes we can say, oh, I trust in God because we have done all the right things. So surely things will turn out right. But A plus B doesn't always equal C, does it? We can do everything right, and still things can end so poorly. Lastly, a warrior is willing to go the distance. To go the distance, a long obedience in the same direction is to admit it's a long game and we don't know when the war's over. And I don't want to say like, oh, we're always under attack. We just got to always be ready. Be a warrior, be a warrior, or be a warrior. But for the sake of this theme, we've got to be ready in and out of season. To stand up. Warrior doesn't mean you're outgoing. Warrior doesn't mean you're introverted. Warrior doesn't have any hold on your personality, obviously on your past, as we've already covered. A warrior is who you were born to be. You were built to stand and take your place in your family, among your friends, in your community. In this time in history, the Lord knew you'd walk the earth. He knew you would hold a place so special, so needed. I feel some background music coming on. I don't know where it's going. Oh, there you are. I was like, oh, I'm feeling myself right now. This is good. He just snuck up there. Like a ninja worship leader there. But a warrior. They know when to go the distance. I think someone with chronic pain knows that. I think a mom who has a kid with special needs knows that. I think a single mom knows that. I think a mom who feels down and out, a woman who feels down and out, a woman who feels up and out, single, married, kids, no kids, young, middle, old, older, wherever you want to identify on that spectrum. You know that this is a long game. You know that things could be hard for a while. And how necessary it is to remember that your willingness to engage in your own life and show up is half the battle. It's half the battle. Joshua, again, protege of Moses. When the mantle was on him, Moses was gone, and it was his job to lead the people of God into the promised land. In Joshua 5, it says, when Joshua was near the town of Jericho, the promised land, the first city of the promised land, the first gift God had for the Israelites was this land to take, but they had to engage. It's one of the reasons we named our son Jericho, because he was our promise. He looked up, Joshua did, and saw a man standing in front of him with a sword in hand. Joshua went up to him and demanded, are you friend or foe? So he was in warrior mode, y'all. He was ready. Neither one, he replied. I am the commander of the Lord's army. At this, Joshua fell with his face to the ground in reverence. I am at your command, he said. What do you want your servant to do? Willing. The commander of the Lord's army replied, take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy. And Joshua did as he was told. Do you think Joshua, son of Nun, would know when he was born that he was going to be one of the greatest warriors and leaders in all of human history? I don't think he did. Did you know when you woke up this morning that you were one of the greatest women in human history? You, with all your baggage, with all your crap, you are one of the greatest women in human history. You are a warrior not to be messed with. There is more in you than you can even dream or imagine. You really are a force. I mean it, that's not lip service. Do you know who you are? Do you know the capacity God has for you? His hand in your life? You are nothing ordinary. When we're willing to go the distance, never take the easy way, but the right way, even if the hard way is the right way, something beautiful happens. Others start following us. Others walk in our wake, and they see just how good God is. You expose the light of the world when you walk as a warrior. You expose the power of the King when you take up your sword and you stand valiantly. When life throws you arrows and you claim, no, I will trust the King. I will trust the King because he is for me. Losing a baby after, I hardly never cry. You did this to me. It's all your fault. I pride myself on keeping it together. And I judge all the other people who do cry. So truly, it's my own cross to bear. Sin to bear. When you lose a baby after they've lived with you for 3 months, and you go back home and you break down the nursery that was ready for him, and you take down the pictures off the wall of him that the adoption agency sent you, when you give his clothes to the Goodwill, and little shoes that people had bought you at your baby shower, you remember that you're still a warrior and you did what you could, because things don't always go for the way of the warrior, do they? I can't stand up here and say everything is going to be great because you already know that's a lie. You know, babies do go back into an orphanage. You know, husbands do leave you. You know you are betrayed. You know you do get laid off and you don't know how you're going to pay the bills because life is freaking real, right? When I learned that God was with me, even in my loss of losing a mom and dad, a mom who never nursed me, a father who never held me close, there was someone else there in the shadows all along. You know, I've always come to think that when something happens and we find the grace and goodness of Jesus, his grace is retroactive, and that's true. His grace can heal what's happened in the past. But then something glorious happens and he opens the curtain and you reveal he's been there all along. He was there at the beginning. The minute I took my first breath, he was holding me. Last week, I have about 5 minutes left, I know. Last week, I got an email from a gal. She's like, hey, I listened to your podcast, and I know that sounds crazy, but your experience visiting your orphanage is so similar to mine. And I was like, well, there's 31 million orphans. I'm sure a lot of us have very similar stories. I didn't say that to her face, P.S. I just kept that to myself. And I was like, oh, interesting. That's so interesting. And she's like, can I talk to you about it? And I'm like, for sure. So we got on a phone call. And after looking through our paperwork, we discovered we were from the exact same orphanage. And for a girl who has no mother or father, my only blood relative is the one who calls me mama with that curly hair and white skin. It was a sweet thing to see that God was faithful. She had found the Lord. She's actually from Wisconsin. It was beautiful. If he is with her, if he's with me, then I know he's with all those other little babies too. When Prince Charming called it quits, and I wondered, what do I do now? It was my first boyfriend. I was that girl who lettered in youth group in high school, really into Jesus, awkwardly so. And I remember thinking, I took the purity pledge. I did everything right. I got the sign off from my pastor to even date this guy. I didn't expect to leave his house with a tear-stained face and wonder if I was going to be loved. When the job I loved was at odds with my convictions, I left. And at the time I was the breadwinner. I made double what my husband was making. We suffered very practical suffering in ways we had never ached before, wondering how on earth we were going to pay our bills. We had just bought our dream house about 6 months before I stepped away, leaving so much more than just a job. We left our faith community, switched doctors because we had to because we lost our insurance. Everything. My son's schooling was compensated through my job, lost that. But I had to live by my convictions. Because a warrior knows that when you stand in the light and you stand in the truth and you stand in the goodness of God, you may lose a lot, but you sure won't lose him. Can you stand with me? As sister to sister and as friend to friend, would you grab the hand beside you? I know what you're thinking. You're like, really? For real? Don't do this. This is the reason I didn't want to come to this. I thought they'd make me do this. I don't. She wants to bridge the gap. Honor that, okay? And would you repeat after me? I am victorious. Girl, say it like you mean it. I am a warrior. I am courageous. Come what may, hell or high water, my God is with me, an ever-present help in trouble. Jesus, I thank you for these beautiful women. I thank you what you have already done in their lives, the track record of your faithfulness, of your goodness, and of your mercy. And I know without a shadow of a doubt, you are just getting started. You will do what only you can do in their lives. The God who calls us, the God who arms us, we know our greatest weaponry, our greatest weapon of warfare is to trust you with everything, to step into the light and give you our whole selves, to take off our shoes and claim holy ground, because it's all sacred, it's all kingdom, our coming, our going, not just our faith life, not just showing up for church. Our parenting is sacred and holy. Our job is sacred and holy. Our friendships are sacred and holy. Everywhere we go, everything we do, every act is all kingdom. When we honor you, we trust you with everything that we are. And we all said together, amen. Thanks for having me.